The house was too quiet now, too cold, even with the fireplace crackling softly, even with the lights on in every room. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something had been drained from the air the moment Evelyn died. She passed 2 months ago. It wasn't sudden. Cancer doesn't believe in surprises. It takes its time, like a slow thief. But the day her heart finally stopped, the world seemed to stop with it. Daniel hadn't changed anything in the bedroom since. Her robe still hung on the hook beside the door. Her slippers rested by the edge of the bed, exactly where she'd left them. And the pillow on her side, still fluffed, still carrying the faintest smell of her vanilla shampoo, remained untouched. But the odd thing was, he didn't feel alone in that room. Not once. It began subtly. The sheets on her side sometimes looked wrinkled in the morning, as if someone had lain there. The pillow slightly sunken, like a head had rested all night. He chalked it up to his grief, maybe even sleepwalking, or some psychological need to pretend she was still there. He told himself a lot of things back then, until she started breathing. It was faint at first, so soft he thought it was wind sneaking through the window. But then he held his breath one night, his chest tight, eyes wide open, and he heard it again, shallow, even, familiar. Even the next morning, he convinced himself it was a dream, a cruel, vivid dream. He kept going to work, kept smiling at neighbors, pretending to function. But every night it got worse. The breathing became louder. The sheets shifted beside him like a body turning over. Once, he swore he felt her arm brush against his back, warm and solid for a moment too long to be imagined. And he didn't run. That's the strange part. He missed her too much to be afraid. In fact, he began to look forward to bedtime. Every night, she returned. He started whispering to her again. Little things. I miss you, Evie. Or, remember that lake house we wanted? Sometimes he thought he heard the slightest hum in return, like a breath against his neck. He didn't dare turn over, not at first. He was terrified that if he saw her, truly saw her, it might break whatever fragile miracle was happening. But the nights became colder, and the space beside him didn't. He found warmth there, where none should be. The outline in the bed grew more defined. He began leaving her favorite blanket folded neatly at her side. By morning, it would always be unfolded, used. On the 24th night, he finally turned. His heart pounded in his ears. Sweat slicked his palms as he clenched the sheet, inch by inch, and turned his head. There was nothing. The shape in the bed was gone. But then, just as he turned back, he felt the unmistakable press of lips against the back of his neck. Ice, cold, lingering, his breath caught. And that night, he didn't sleep. The next day, he didn't go to work. He sat in the living room all day, staring at the doorway, waiting for nightfall like a man expecting judgment. His fingers trembled around a cup of tea he never drank. He didn't know whether to pray or scream. That night, she came again. Only this time, she whispered his name. Daniel. It wasn't loving. It wasn't soft. It sounded like wind across glass. A crackling, dry wrong. He turned again. Still nothing. But the next morning, Evelyn's wedding ring, buried with her in a closed casket, was sitting neatly on her pillow. Daniel stared at the ring as if it might vanish. It was her ring. No doubt. He'd held it in his hand when they closed the casket. He remembered slipping it off her cold finger in the hospital, kissing her knuckles one last time before the nurse wheeled her away. It had a tiny nick on the inner band, from when she once dropped it on the driveway. He used to tease her about it. Now it sat on her pillow, gleaming, untouched. He didn't dare pick it up, not at first. He stood over the bed for what felt like hours, chest tight, breath shallow, mind clawing for logic where there was none. Had someone broken in? Dug up the grave? Was this a prank? His hands shook as he checked every door, every lock, every window. Nothing was out of place. No signs of a break-in. No mud, no dirt, no prints. Just that ring, sitting where her head should have been. By the third hour of pacing, Daniel finally gave in. He picked it up. Cold. Heavier than he remembered. He turned it over in his palm, brushing his thumb across the engraving on the inside. Always, Evie, her handwriting. Her promise. The moment his skin fully closed around it, a draft swept through the room, rattling the bedroom door and chilling him to the bone. He dropped the ring with a choked gasp. It bounced once and rolled beneath the bed. He didn't reach for it. Instead, he went into the kitchen and poured himself a shot of the whiskey he hadn't touched since the funeral. Then another, and another. By nightfall, he was drunk enough to speak to the empty air. "If you're here," he slurred, "then say something. Show me something. Be you. Don't play with me, Evie." Silence. He waited. The fire in the living room crackled, but everything else was still, until the hallway light clicked off. Daniel blinked. No way. Then the next light went off, and the next, a domino of darkness rolling toward him down the corridor. He stood frozen, bottle in hand, as the final bulb, the one right above him, flickered, and then went out. Now he was surrounded in thick, silent black. Only the fire cast flickers across the wall, stretching shadows like arms reaching toward him. That's when he heard it again. Daniel. This time it wasn't a whisper. It was a whisper inside him. Not through ears, but bones. It echoed behind his ribs, between his lungs. Familiar, but layered with something rotten. He stood there, paralyzed, until a single frame dropped from the mantel behind him. Glass shattered. Daniel spun around and saw the photo face down. Their wedding picture. When he picked it up, the image inside had changed. It was still Evelyn, but not the woman he remembered. Her skin was pale, her smile twisted too wide, eyes black and hollow. And beside her, in the image, was Daniel, aged, gaunt, and expressionless, like a corpse standing next to its bride. Daniel screamed. He threw the frame across the room and ran. Not out of the house, but up the stairs. To the bedroom. To the place where her scent still lingered. He slammed the door shut and pressed his back against it, panting. Then he saw it. The ring. On the pillow again. In the exact same spot. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Why are you doing this?" No answer. He moved to the bed slowly, sat on the edge. His hand trembled as he reached out for the ring again. This time, when his fingers touched it, they burned. He yanked his hand back with a cry. The flesh of his fingertips blistered like they'd touched a hot stove. He backed away, horrified, clutching his hand, and then the mirror across the room fogged up. Right before his eyes, letters began to appear on the surface, as if written by an unseen finger. "Let me in." Daniel's knees gave out. He stared at the message until the mirror cracked. Not shattered. Cracked right down the middle, from top to bottom, splitting his reflection in two. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. And for the first time, he locked the bedroom door from the inside. Morning brought no comfort. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the cracked mirror. The message was gone, wiped clean like it had never been there. But his fingers still throbbed, the blisters angry and red. Every movement stung. He didn't go to work again. Didn't answer his phone. He just sat, with the curtains drawn and the room heavy with silence. The ring still sat on Evelyn's pillow like a shrine, or a threat. Around noon, he dug out the box from the hall closet. The one with her things. He hadn't opened it since the funeral. It still smelled like her. Lavender, cinnamon, and something older, something warm. Inside were cards, letters, her scarf, even an old notebook she used to scribble recipes in. But at the very bottom, wrapped in a faded silk cloth, was something he didn't remember putting there. A photo. Not a wedding photo, not one of their vacations or anniversaries. This one was old, yellowed, maybe decades before he met her. It showed a much younger Evelyn, maybe a teenager, standing in front of a small, eerie house with thick woods behind it. She wasn't smiling, In fact, her face looked distant, blank, and next to her was a woman Daniel didn't recognize. Older, thin, wearing black. Her hand gripped Evelyn's shoulder a little too tightly. On the back of the photo, scribbled in what looked like a child's hand, were the words, "Blood keeps the door open." Daniel stared at it for a long time. Then, something in the attic thumped. Loud, heavy, like furniture being dragged. He flinched, nearly dropping the photo. The attic had always been locked. Evelyn never wanted it opened. She used to say it made her feel watched. He thought it was just nerves or a bad memory, so he never questioned it. But now, he found the attic key in the drawer beneath the hallway table. His hands shook as he fitted into the lock, breath shallow. The door creaked open. Dust fell like slow snowflakes as he climbed the narrow wooden stairs. The attic smelled like mildew and old secrets. Boxes were stacked high, some labeled in Evelyn's handwriting. Childhood, college, mom's things. But in the corner, behind a stack of old holiday decorations, was a trunk, black, metal, and locked with a rusted clasp. The lid groaned as he pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, beneath layers of linen and decay, was a small wooden box, ornate, carved with symbols he didn't recognize. When he lifted the lid, he found hair. Braided strands of black hair, tied with a red ribbon. And below it, a locket. Inside the locket was a photo of the same older woman from the picture. The one holding Evelyn's shoulder, but the real horror was carved into the underside of the wooden lid. A phrase. "She made the deal. You owe the debt." Daniel stumbled back. What deal? But even as he said it aloud, the attic floor groaned behind him. He turned and froze. A figure stood at the top of the stairs. Not Evelyn. Not quite. Her body looked like Evelyn's, but wrong. Her skin was gray, translucent in places. Her head hung at an unnatural angle, like her neck had been broken and never reset. And those eyes, black, sunken pits that stared through him, not at him. When she spoke, her voice cracked like dried leaves. "You let me in." Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She stepped forward, the floor groaning beneath each unnatural step. Her hand stretched toward him, bony, stiff, her ring finger missing. "I came back for you." Daniel bolted past her, nearly falling down the attic stairs. He slammed the door and locked it behind him, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. But from the other side, she whispered, "Sleep well tonight, darling." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room with every light on, the television playing static in the background. He kept the fireplace lit, as if flames might somehow hold her back. But deep down, he knew they wouldn't. His eyes burned from exhaustion, but every time his head drooped, he saw her face, that hollow, broken version of Evelyn, staring from behind his eyelids. By morning, he looked like a ghost himself, sunken eyes, unshaven. His shirt clung to him with sweat, even though the room was cold. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, gripping the sink, trying to tell himself he was still sane. But then he saw it, just over his shoulder in the mirror, her, standing in the hallway behind him. Still, silent, he spun around, nothing. When he looked back, the mirror was cracked again. This time, the crack had split his reflection perfectly down the center of his face. He backed out of the bathroom slowly. Daniel didn't know where to go or who to call. He couldn't tell the police his dead wife was haunting him, or that a ghost had burned his fingers and left her wedding ring on his pillow. They'd throw him in a hospital, so he did the only thing he could think of. He went to see Margaret, Evelyn's mother. She lived in a care home 2 towns over, quiet and fading into dementia, but maybe, just maybe, she'd remember something about the strange photo, the house in the woods, or the woman gripping Evelyn's shoulder. Margaret looked worse than he remembered. Frail, her white hair barely covered her scalp. But when Daniel placed the photo in her hands, her eyes sharpened like a knife had just slid through her mind. She stared at it, unmoving. "Where did you find this?" she whispered. It was in one of Evelyn's boxes. In the attic. Margaret's hand trembled. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, then thought better of it. "Who is the woman in the picture?" he pressed. Margaret looked up at him, her voice thin and shaking. "That's her aunt, Miriam. Evelyn was born on her land. She used to say strange things about doors and blood, about what hides behind mirrors." Daniel's chest tightened. "Why didn't you ever mention her?" "Because she's dead," Margaret said, her voice cracking. "She died when Evelyn was 16. Took her own life. Said she'd made a mistake. A binding mistake. She warned Evelyn not to open the box. Not to speak the name. She thought Evelyn was the last key." Daniel leaned closer. "What name?" Margaret hesitated. Then, barely louder than breath, she said, "Velthara." The moment she spoke it, every light in the room flickered. One bulb above them exploded, sending glass raining down. Margaret screamed. Daniel was on his feet, heart pounding, chest tight. Nurses ran in, confused by the commotion. Margaret clutched his sleeve with surprising strength. "Whatever you saw, it's not Evelyn. It's wearing her. Do you understand? She made a deal. It's come to collect." Daniel left in a daze. "Velthara." He repeated the name in his head, feeling it thrum in his skull like a vibration, like a hum just below human hearing. When he returned home, everything looked the same, until he stepped into the bedroom. There was a figure lying under the blanket. On her side of the bed, not a shadow, not a feeling, a body. The blanket rose and fell with breath. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. He stepped forward, each movement a war inside him. Hope and terror locked in a tight, choking grip. "Evelyn," he whispered. The body didn't move. He circled to the other side of the bed, his breath held, his pulse thudding in his ears. He reached out, pulled the blanket down. The body underneath was pale, hair black and matted. Her skin was decaying, lips blue, a smile stitched too wide across her cheeks. But the eyes snapped open, black, endless. She reached up and clutched his wrist. "Welcome home, Daniel." His scream echoed through the house. Daniel's scream was strangled halfway through his throat. The thing in the bed, wearing Evelyn's skin, with a smile torn too wide and eyes blacker than death, held his wrist in a grip colder than any winter wind. It was strength without muscle, force without motion, like gravity had turned against him. He yanked free, stumbling back, crashing into the nightstand. The lamp fell and shattered, plunging half the room into shadow. "Please," he rasped, his voice barely human. "You're not her." It sat up, not rose, sat, with unnatural fluidity, like a puppet yanked by invisible strings. Her head tilted, mouth twitching as it tried to mimic something between concern and desire. "I waited," it said, voice scraping across his nerves. "She let me in so you wouldn't be alone. Isn't that what love is, Daniel?" A door, willingly opened. He backed toward the hallway, heart hammering. "You're not Evelyn. I remember your hands." It continued softly. "I remember the day she wore your ring. The words you said. The way your breath caught when she walked down the aisle."
"Stop it!"
he shouted. "I remember what she whispered as she died." The thing paused. "She begged me to stay. With you." Daniel froze. "No." She didn't want to leave. She cried. She was afraid of the dark. So she made a deal. Her soul, for one more lifetime beside you. Tears spilled down his cheeks. His lips trembled. Liar, the thing, Velthara, stood now. Its hands dripped with cold, dark rot, fingernails stretching too long. Evelyn's nightgown clung to its decayed frame. But her voice, somehow cracked through. "Help me," it whispered in a fleeting moment of clarity. "Please, Daniel." Then it smiled again, wide and horrible. "But you already did." Daniel ran, down the stairs, through the kitchen, toward the basement. The only room in the house without mirrors, without reflections. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and slumped to the floor, gasping. He needed to end it. Not survive it. End it. He remembered what Margaret said: blood keeps the door open. And the photo, she made the deal. You owe the debt. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a plan began to form. A reckless, desperate plan. He grabbed the toolbox, pulled out a crowbar, and a can of gasoline meant for the generator. If Evelyn had made a deal, if her body had become the vessel, he couldn't free her. But maybe, just maybe, he could trap it. Back in the box. Back in the attic. He climbed the stairs again with the canister in one hand and the crowbar in the other. The hallway lights dimmed the higher he went, the shadows growing longer, deeper. He could hear it pacing in the bedroom now. Humming. Evelyn's lullaby. He didn't stop. He reached the attic and shoved the trunk aside. The carved box was still there. Still open. Still waiting. He splashed gasoline across the floor, across the box, across the wood that had soaked up generations of memory. He called her name. Evelyn. Come. The thing moved. Slowly. Like it knew it was being tricked but didn't care. He could hear it climbing, each creaking step behind him. Closer. He knelt by the carved box and whispered something through the tears. I'm sorry. Then he struck the lighter. The flames caught fast, crawling like hunger across the wood, licking up the walls, the ceiling. Smoke thickened, the room becoming a choking tunnel of heat and screams. The thing shrieked behind him. Not a voice, voices, hundreds, thousands, male, female. Children all screaming through Evelyn's throat. You cannot destroy what you promised, it howled. But Daniel didn't stop. He dragged the carved box toward the center of the room, even as flames scorched his skin, even as the air thickened and blistered his lungs. And just as the ceiling began to give, the thing lunged. He turned, grabbed Evelyn's wedding ring from his pocket, the same ring that had started it all, and shoved it into the box. The flames exploded, and everything went dark. They found Daniel in the ruins 2 days later. The house was gone. The attic had collapsed completely. Fire investigators called it accidental. Old wiring, they said, but no one could explain how he survived with only minor burns. He was taken to a hospital, then a facility. He didn't speak for weeks, until one day, during a therapy session, the doctor asked, "Do you know why the house burned down?" Daniel looked up, eyes hollow, voice ragged. She was trying to stay. Your wife. He shook his head slowly, then smiled a tired, broken smile. No, something else. The doctor paused, pen hovering over paper. And where is it now, Daniel? Daniel looked at his hand, at the bandage covering the blistered palm, where the ring had fused to his skin, and whispered, almost lovingly, "Still with me."